So for my book review, I read The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, written by Rebecca Skloot. And the book is about a black American woman who died of cervical cancer in 1951 at age 31. But before she died, doctors took a sample from her cervical tumor without her knowledge or her consent and used it for medical research. The cells were known as HeLa cells, and they were the first cells to survive and thrived and multiplied all over the world. And since then, they've been used in medical and scientific research and have played a large role in medical advances and developments that have saved thousands of lives today. So, one thing I learned about the human body that I didn't already know was how important cells are. And I knew that we were made of thousands of cells and they multiply and divide, but I didn't know that there isn't a single person in the world that hasn't benefited from HeLa cells in some way, and from the medical advances that have been discovered with them. I learned how quickly cells divide and how important they are for medically advancing and for testing research and in laboratories, because they helped develop the polio vaccine. They discovered secrets about cancer, viruses. They helped develop in vitro fertilization, cloning, and gene mapping. A really important part of this book is the controversy it discusses. As Henrietta's cells were taken from her without her knowledge or consent, 25 years later her family found out for the first time that they had been used in thousands of laboratories. The book asks questions like, is consent necessary in order to test patients who are unaware of procedures being done on them with their genetic material? And does a person's biological material still belong to that person once it's been detached from their body? Rebecca explains that one day a doctor called Henrietta's husband. He had a third grade education and didn't really understand what they were trying to explain to him. They were telling him that his wife was still alive in a sense, and that her cells were all over the world, and that his children need to be tested for cancer as well. He didn't even know what a cell was, but from that point on, him and his family got sucked into a world of research that they didn't understand, and the cells almost took over their lives. As she explains in the book, Rebecca became very close with Henrietta's daughter, Deborah, even though it took almost a year. It was really difficult for her family to understand the situation and let a random person come into their lives with millions of questions that they didn't even know how to answer about Henrietta. Henrietta's cells were the first human biological materials ever bought and sold, and it helped launch a multi-billion-dollar industry. And so when Deborah's brothers and her family found out that people were selling vials of their mother's cells, and that his family wasn't even receiving any of the resulting money, they got very upset. Her family has been living in poverty most of their life, working on farms and away from city life, so many of them couldn't even afford health assurance. And this is another issue and controversy that arises throughout the whole book. So I think one of the biggest lessons for everyone to realize is that there's human beings behind every biological sample used in laboratories, and so much of science today still revolves around using human tissues and biological materials. And scientists need to realize that there's people behind those samples, and they once had families, and they once had their own thoughts and feelings about what happened to their tissues once they were to die, but sometimes they're left out of the equation. But we should remember to try to keep them into the equation and follow their consent. So I would definitely recommend this book to other people. It's not just a boring book about cells and what they do, but it's a book about how they started being used medically and where it all started and who it started with. Rebecca Skloot describes the story of Henrietta so well, you almost develop a relationship with the characters because she gives you so much background and includes every detail. It keeps you interested and really makes you think about what's right and what's wrong. I'm really interested in bioethics, and this book addresses that directly. It makes you think, what would you do if your cells were being used in research today without your consent, without you knowing, or having your cells make billions of dollars but you're getting nothing? So I would definitely recommend it if you're interested in that sort of thing, and it was a very good read.